between a long, drawn-out sermon and a hostage situation. So I'll try not to take you there. But what I'm going to talk about today is, people right now in the world are having so many prosperity issues, both in individual lives, in this church even, and in the world. And so I thought today I'd talk about universal natural laws of abundance. Now I'm talking about laws, not rules. There's a difference between a rule is you've got to do this. A law is just a natural law that's working in your life whether you're aware of it or not. And I always use the example of gravity as a natural law. You go up on the roof and you jump, you're going to fall down and go boom, boom, whether you believe in the law of gravity or not, right? So that's a law, not a rule. And in the world, we have a tendency to go around trying to make our abundance in the wrong way. For instance, lawyers only prosper if you get into trouble. Doctors only prosper if you get sick. Police prosper if you become a criminal, and undertakers prosper if you die. That leaves only a thief wishes you prosperity in life. Do you see how we work against each other sometimes instead of with each other? And so if we just understand how the natural laws of the universe work, it's a much better way. Now, there's 4 or 5 really great unity teachers that teach principles of abundance, and I'm going to take a little bit from each one today and put them together. I hope I haven't bitten off more than I can chew, but I'll try not to hold you hostage, all right? Each one of them stresses a little bit different the natural laws. And you've all heard of the law of attraction. We attract whatever is in our consciousness. Whether we're aware of it or not, we're constantly attracting like a magnet, drawing things to us by what's up here. And the law of cause and effect, that every effect out there in our lives has an original cause in our mind. Altogether, no, oops. Or the law of compensation, as within, so without. There's another oops, all right? And Reverend Eric Butterworth, who's one of the great old unity teachers, talks about the mental equivalent. That if you want something in your life, you have to have the mental equivalent of it in your consciousness. And if you think about it, many of us constantly think about what we don't have or that there's not enough. And so we get that mental equivalent. It shows up in our life because that's what we're constantly focused on. Where if we just switch that, as Eric Butterworth said, God is not a being giving or withholding substance. God is the allness of the ever-present substance in which we live, move, and have our being. So God can only do to you what God can do through you, through your consciousness, having the mental equivalent. So build an awareness of this consciousness, and you will always attract experiences that reflect that mental equivalent. It's a powerful law, the mental equivalent. So repeat with me if you're comfortable. I am one with the all-sufficiency of God. Together, I am one with the all-sufficiency of God, and I live in the all-sufficiency of God. Together, I live in the all-sufficiency of God. And to go along with that, all our beliefs, and we've all been programmed with so many beliefs, determine the within part that shows up in the without part. There's an old song called When It Rains Pennies from Heaven. Remember that old song? And most people don't believe that. I know I grew up programmed with the belief you really have to work hard for your money. My parents worked so hard, and that was sort of programmed into me that it had to be hard. But, they didn't believe that money just fell from the sky. But I'm here to tell you that it does. And the stories I'm telling today, I may have told before, but they're my stories, so I'm sticking to it, all right? And because they're the stories that have proved to me that this stuff works. And I have many more, but these are the ones that were the most significant in my life. When I was raising my children when they were really young, my ex got hurt at work, and he was out of work for a couple months, and we didn't have much, and we thought, well, how are we going to live? How are we going to eat? How are we going to pay the rent? And of course, I was reading Norman Vincent Peale, so I was trying to say we just have to let go and let God. And that kind of irritated my ex a little bit when I did that because, how are we going to get through those times? Well, meanwhile, a storm came through our town and tore the paint right off one side of our house. So not only was he out of work, but now the paint was ripped off the side of our house. Well, this was back when insurance companies paid you directly instead of who you got to fix it. So they wrote us out a check. I don't remember what it was for, but it was enough that we could live off of on the time that he was out of work. And then when he went back to work, we painted the house ourselves instead of hiring to get it done. And to me, was that not pennies from heaven? That storm was literally pennies from heaven. So if you're comfortable, repeat with me, I live, move, and have my being in the all-sufficiency of God. Together? I live, move, and have my being in the all-sufficiency of God. And then Jesus reminded us we have to ask to receive. And I don't think he meant just ask for whatever you want and it'll automatically show up in your life, although I've had that happen at times. But divine ideas come, signs and promptings that show us the way to have that question answered. Peter, you gotta love him sometimes in the Bible. He was always trying to get around things. And one day he decided he didn't want to have to pay taxes. Yeah, after all, he worked for Jesus. He shouldn't have to pay taxes, right? So he goes up to Jesus and he says, do I have to pay taxes? How am I going to do this? He thought Jesus was going to tell him a way to get around it. And instead, Jesus knew he was a fisherman. So he said, go fishing. Well, Peter did, and he caught some fish, and here there was a coin in one of the mouths of the fish. And he was able to use that to pay his taxes. Now, it's a symbolic story because there was an old idiom of the times that said a fish had a coin in its mouth. And so what probably happened was he took the fish and sold it and had enough to pay his taxes. But metaphysically, what it's telling us in that story is we fish for divine ideas. In the sea of consciousness, we ask, and those divine ideas come to us, which are represented by fish, metaphysically represent divine ideas in the sea of consciousness that will tell us what to do. Well, let's go on. There are many, many laws, many. Our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, in his book, Prosperity, stressed the idea of forgiveness. He believed in forgiveness so strongly and how it related to your prosperity that every night before he went to sleep, he spent 15 minutes in prayer checking his consciousness to make sure he didn't hold anyone in debt to him. He believed if you didn't forgive, you were holding someone in debt to you, and then you would end up in debt. So think of that. Every night he spent forgiving, letting go. I let go of this, I let go of that, so that his prosperity would never be interrupted. So you might want to think, either now or when you get home, who are you holding in debt to you? Is there anyone that you're holding in debt to you? And it was often described that it's like a rubber band. You pull it back, you pull it back, you pull it back real tight, and then you let go and boom. And that's how it is with forgiveness. You let go and your prosperity just comes forth because you're not holding anyone in debt to you. Okay, well, if that one doesn't work for you, H. Emily Cady talked about it's all in how we see God, and I've often talked about that here. That God is not a being, a man in the sky giving you things, but divine substance expressing through you, kind of like pour yourself in me, divine substance, and I will shape it with my consciousness. And I mean abundance in all areas of your life, especially health. All my issues have always seemed to play out in health in my life. And once in a while we get our bikes out and ride around, and we have a neighborhood that is a little difficult to ride around in because every once in a while one of the streets will go up. I call it a hill. Other people would call it a little slope, but at my age I call it a hill. And I was riding up one day trying to get up the top of it, and I was going, please God, give me the strength. And then I realized that was not a unity prayer. First of all, God is not a man in the sky that you have to plead with. and that the strength of God was already in me. So I changed my prayer all the way up, puffing and puffing, to divine strength is mine. It fills every cell in my body, and I made it up the hill. So let's pray that together. Divine strength is mine. Together. Divine strength is mine. It fills every cell in my body. Together. It fills every cell in my body. So whatever you're looking for, strength, vitality, energy, it's already there. We just need to call it forth. Well, churches, believe it or not, can forget too and go into fear. Even churches, even unity churches. My first church I was ever in, which seems like a lifetime ago, lost their major tither, moved away. And the board was very fearful because they had been relying on that person. You know, we love and appreciate everyone's offering, but the major tithers sometimes are the ones that keep the doors open because it takes a lot to keep churches going. And I had to remind the board that while we loved and appreciated her as a channel of our blessings, that God was our source and that the divine presence would just work through other channels. And they didn't quite believe me, but they went with it. And within a week, it was such a short time, it was almost scary how easily it happened. The electric company called us and said, you know, we need a little spot. Could we rent a little parcel of your land? It wasn't even as big as the platform up here. We need to put a little station box, and we will pay you monthly rent on your land for using that as for our station box. And the amount they gave us made up for what we lost by her moving away. Is that good or what? So would you repeat with me if you're comfortable? I release fear of the outer. Together. I release fear of the outer. God is my source and substance. Together. God is my source and substance. And I'm not talking about a man in the sky, but the underlying essence that is constantly flowing through us. Well, let's move to Catherine Ponder. How many years have read an old Catherine Ponder book? She goes way back, doesn't she? And we have a lot of her books in the bookstore. The Prospering Power of Love. Love isn't just some frilly thing. It's a power. And any idea you give love to increases. And she uses it in her teachings for prosperity. Give love, it'll increase. And of course it can work backwards too if you don't give love, if you withhold love or give hate. I remember one time I went to a store, and you know how you get change. And some of the money's been around the block a while. And the change that I got back was absolutely filthy. It literally almost smelled. It was so bad. And I looked at that and I didn't even want to touch it. And I didn't love that money at all. I almost hated it and didn't want it in my purse. And by the time I got home, I hadn't intended on spending any more money that day. But by the time I got home, I realized the money was gone. I had spent it. And I realized, well, I gave hate to that money instead of love. Of course, it wasn't going to be there for long. And even though it was smelly and stinky, it was still money. So whenever I pay my bills, I give love to the electric company. I give love to the city of Cookeville. I give love to my mortgage company. You know, they're providing for all those services. Give love, and there will always be enough. Jesus knew that. How do you think he changed water into wine? You've heard the old joke where Jesus and 12 apostles went into the bar, and Jesus looked at the bartender and said, "Give me 12 waters, please." And then he turns to the apostles and winks. Give love. That's all you need is love. All right, well, finally, there's good old Edwin Gaines. How many here have experienced Reverend Edwin Gaines? She is a force to be reckoned with, still alive and still teaching. And she has some wonderful principles, but the first one she gives is, don't complain for 30 days. Can you imagine that? I heard some groans. I don't think I could make it till noon, could you? Don't complain for 30 days altogether. Now, oops. And her second one, and she's big on this one, is to tithe 10% to your source of spiritual nourishment. And people wonder about that because the practice of tithing has been going on for centuries. And if you study numerology, you know that 10 is the amount of increase it takes to shift consciousness. And so that's the more scientific reason of why it works. An example, I mean, I've had times in my life when I've had money and I've had times when I haven't. But 10% is the same in either way. When I went to ministerial school, I went with very little money. And I didn't know how that amount was going to last me all the way through the years of school. So the first thing I did was tithe 10% of it as soon as I got there. And then a friend of mine had a house that had a little mother-in-law's apartment next to it, and she rented it to me at a very low rate. And then I got a job at Silent Unity, praying with people all over the world, all the way through school. My job was to pray with people. Can you imagine what a wonderful way that was to get through school? And money came out of the blue. Pennies from heaven came out of the blue. And my favorite story of how these laws work is the day that I was so cold it was in the middle of winter, and the heating system in the mother-in-law's apartment was kind of a cheap one, and it just did not heat very well. And when it did blow, it just felt like you were getting cold air on you. And I got so mad at God that day. I said, here I am going to ministerial school, and I'm freezing to death. I want money now so I can turn up the heat and be warm. And I was so mad and prayed from a very angry, energetic way. And then I went out to the mailbox, and you won't believe this, but there was a check in the mail for me that day for $500 from a church I'd never heard of before. But churches practice tithing too. We tithe here, 10% of what we get in. And they pulled my name out of a hat that I would be the ministerial student that they would tithe to that week. Now, I don't recommend getting mad at God every day. I don't recommend it, but it worked. I hate to say it. And the reason it worked was I had energy behind that prayer. Now, you can have joyous energy. You can have exciting energy. You don't need to be angry. But it was the power behind my prayer. And it all started when I started school with giving. Jesus said, "Give and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." That's the law of giving and receiving. So I double dog dare you, open that flow through forgiveness, through giving, through clearing your consciousness of I don't have enough to I am one with the all-sufficiency of God. Use all these natural laws to prosper you, and collectively we'll use them here at Unity. Now I want to close with a book that I found in the bookstore one day on the giveaway pile. It was a book called Outrageous Openness, Letting the Divine Take the Lead by Tasha Silver. And she said, if you embody generosity and flow, what needs to come will always come, regardless of the insane economy. Sometimes people promise, look, when I have enough, you'll see, I'll give. Yet here's the catch. You have to act from this expansiveness in your life as if it already is, in order for it to change. And then she finished her book with a poem. Do whatever it takes to feel prosperous. It's all about how you feel, despite appearances. How do you feel inside? And never, never say you're broke. The universe will be glad to accommodate that if you want. Never say you're broke or I can't afford it. If you dwell in the vibration of fear and constriction, you'll attract that. That's the mental equivalent. If you insist you never have enough, the world will hardly agree. But if you let yourself be what you think you need, one way or another, it will come. Okay, well, I'll let that hostage situation go with one last joke, and then we'll pray. After worship one Sunday, a little boy told the minister, when I grow up, I'm going to have money, and I'm going to give you lots of money. And the minister said, well, thank you. What made you say that? And the boy said, well, my daddy said you're one of the poorest preachers we ever had. careful what you say. Let's say some affirmations together. How about for healing? Anybody that needs healing. Together, divine strength is mine. Together, divine strength is mine. Energy flows through every cell in my body. Together, energy flows through every cell in my body. Anybody looking for guidance on a decision? Divine wisdom flows in and through me now, showing me the way. Together, divine wisdom flows in and through me now, showing me the way. Prosperity, I am one with the all-sufficiency of God. Together, I am one with the all-sufficiency of God. How about peace and comfort? Divine love fills me with the peace of the presence. Together, divine love fills me with the peace of the presence. Perfect peace and comfort is mine. Together, perfect peace and comfort is mine. And so it is.